Good morning, everybody. Thank you again. Welcome, welcome back. Thank you. We know you guys have a lot of choices out there these days, so we appreciate the attendance. Again, I'm joined by Jason Wines and Joel Terinsky. They will be manning the questions when you guys pop them in. I apologize, I'm working from home, and I got a landscaper back there who came at the perfect time, so that's awesome. So anyway, today's topic, function keys. So this has been the course of these webinars have come across, and it's been additive in a way that we kind of, one topic kind of builds upon another. This is one of these topics that have some pretty big significance within the Spyder world. Function keys, and I'm just going to kind of to just generally talk about them. Function keys are an item in Spyder that I like to call, for lack of a better term, one-trick ponies. Meaning, they're not something you set up in the simulator or set up in your GUI somewhere and then create one, right? There's a second panel, and I'll start sharing my screen here. Make sure I got the right one showing here. You can see my GUI here. So right down here in the in the command key grid, we have another tab in that panel called function keys. And right now it's blank. I'm going to go to tools options. Notice this is a grid. So if I click on this, I can see little squares that kind of represent positions within this grid. If you go to the tools options menu, you'll see an option there for grid options. This tells you how many rows and columns you can have, okay? So if I were to kind of like, and we talked about this with command keys as well, you can have 20 by 20, but you got to remember it's trying to fit 400 command keys within that little area in there, right? So you want to make that grid size usable, and keep in mind that you can also have multiple pages. We'll talk about that as we go through this a little bit more, okay? So you want to make your grid size something usable. I typically make rows of 8, right? In training, we have a console, we have a montage console, and those are 8 by 2 button panels, and it just organizes them very nicely if they're in rows of 8. That way I can set each button panel to look at a row, okay? Now, if I go into the function key grid, go in there, you can see these spots. I can select multiple spots. But if I go into that I'm just going to start up in the upper left corner, and the way to create one is just to simply right click, okay? When you right click, you get a list of 12 different function keys, okay? Now we're going to systematically just kind of plug through all of these. I may jump over one and then go back to another one, and then just for a certain order. But let's start with the top one, okay? So the first one we see there is called add a background mix key, okay? I put that on there, and it always prompts you for a name. So I'm going to call this 1 second, okay? And if I select that, you'll see that the only setting for a background mix key is the duration, okay? And it defaults to 60 frames. So if I click the go button, so notice there's no program or preview, it's just simply an execute button, go. If I click that, notice the backgrounds mix, they dissolve. I cannot pick a specific pixel space background to mix. They mix all the backgrounds together, okay? And notice when I do that, it's a 1 second duration. Now I may opt to create another one, excuse me, and I'll call this cut. And I'll set the duration to 0. And now when I hit go, it's just a simple 1 second or a 1 frame cut or a 0 frame cut. So you can create multiples of these if you want to have different durations for that, okay? I love my landscaper. Okay, the next one in that line is called backup source key. Now a new function in Spyder Studio is something called the backup source, right? And I'll do just a very quick overview of that. I've got my source list over here on the left. I've got graphics 1, graphics 2, iMag, Mustang, which is content related, Playback Pro, Keynote, Keynote Backup, Blu-ray, and Blu-ray Backup. So all of these sources are coming into my Spyder. Some of them have the wrong input numbers. But all of them, both the mains and the backups, are coming into my system. They're all coming in, feeding an input. Well, in the event that one of my main sources were to fail, notice all of my sources are going, or they show them patched into a router, right? So what I can do is if I select that source, I can come over to the property panel and there's a tab over here called backup. And if you hit the drop down list for the type, you can either assign an actual video source that's coming into either a Spyder input or a router input, a connected upstream router input, or you can choose actually a still image, okay? So once I choose which one, then I pull down the source list and it chooses which one is a backup, right? So if I had, say, Keynote on the screen right there, and for some reason that main Keynote machine died, I could just simply right-click, say, use backup, and it will immediately mix that one off and bring up the backup source, right? You can actually see over here, this one is no longer being used, and now my backup configuration is being used. So I can go back here to say exit backup, and it'll basically revert back to the original one. Without going too far into that, just keep in mind that that will play across all of your command keys. So if you change a source, if you have to revert to a backup source, all of your command keys will revert to the backup source as well. So tying that in, the next function key is called backup source key. We really leverage these function keys to kind of really capitalize some of the new features we have, right? So I'll go in here and say I want to create a backup function key, a backup source function key, and say this is going to be for my Keynote. I'm going to call this Keynote backup. And I come down here, and it's only going to give you a list of the sources that have a backup assigned, okay? So I'm going to say this is for Keynote, and you get options right here. If I drop down the list, it says switch to backup, right? That's just a one direction only. Switch to primary, which is another direction, just the opposite one. Or there's a toggle button, okay? So if I choose the toggle, now you can see when I chose Keynote, it says what's the backup type, it's a source type, and which is the backup source. This is the source. So when I go to use this, I have Keynote on the screen. If I go to click this function key, boom, it basically loads the backup source, hit it again, it toggles back to the main source, okay? So I can create multiples of these, say one for Blu-ray. Oh boy. I can remember how to type, sorry about that. Do the same thing, go pick up over here, pick Blu-ray and say toggle. So now if I were to put Blu-ray on the screen, I can come over here and switch and revert, okay? So very, pretty powerful tool. Now, one thing to note, backup source is not available in X20 or in advanced, okay? So just keep that in mind. There's a little red flag. That is only a Spyder Studio feature. Next one, device freeze key. This is kind of a loaded subject, but bear with me one second. I'm going to skip over that one. I'm going to double back and do device freeze and layer freeze towards the end here, okay? Because that's a different subject. External command key recall, okay? I'm just going to call this external. And what this is designed to do, this is designed to trigger a command key off another Spyder, okay, on the network. So think of it this way. Say you have an X80 driving the main configuration, but you have an overflow room that requires processing, right? Maybe it's even a 200 or 300 series or an X20 right, doing a different room, and you have that on the same network. So you can actually say, all right, I want to put in an IP address of the other unit that's on the network, regardless if it's X20 or 300 series, right, or X80, because they all kind of use the same protocols. I could put in an IP address here of that unit, pick the script ID, which is which command key, right? So that's the actual physical command key number, right? I'll just pick this one. That is the script ID, with the one in the property panel, the one that cannot be changed, not the registry ID. That's the grid position, but the script ID. So this one is number 3, right? So I'll go back to my function key real quick, say ID number 3, and then which queue. Do I want it to go to the preview queue or the program queue or even any other number of the queues when we get it? We're going to get into scripting on Monday, so we'll talk about that then. But I can say, let's go directly to Q1. And when I hit go, that particular box, actually, let me try something here real quick. Just try this real quick. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but no. Anyway, you just put in the IP address. I'm just going to leave it at the one I had, right? And you can actually trigger that from that function key. Now, the nice thing is these function keys can be triggered obviously directly from the function key panel. They can be triggered from a third-party device, such as a Stream Deck or an HRS control panel or AV presets or any of these other products that are out there. And they can also be embedded into a command key, okay? And we'll talk about that when we do some scripting stuff, okay? That'll help understand that. So just keep that in mind. That's what the external command key recall can do. It's designed to trigger a command key off of another Spyder on the same network. That's the trick. It has to be on the same network, okay? Okay, moving on. Let's do the layer freeze key, okay? So I'm gonna launch a lookup here. Let's just put a look on the screen, something like that. And go over here and I'm gonna say add layer freeze key. And I'm gonna call this freeze 7 on. Now, my naming convention might be a little cryptic, but basically I want to freeze that. I want to freeze layer 7. So what I would do is say, go right over here, and I would choose what action. Now, this choice here, this drop-down list, is also a function of Studio, not of X20 or 300 series. You do have the freeze option in X20 and 300 series, but it's a manual. It's just an enable or a disable. So you have to create one to turn it on and then another one to turn it off. Here we give you the option to do turn it on no matter what I do, turn it off no matter what I do, and then there's another one, another toggle function. So if I hit toggle, and then I come down here and you'll see there's absolute versus relative. So if I choose absolute and I choose layer 7, it's going to say, okay, when I hit the go button on this function key, it's going to freeze layer 7. Okay, so there you go. Now notice you see I point at my screen as if you can see what I'm pointing at. You'll see that yellow title bar appears on the layer. Okay, that indicates that layer is housing a still. Okay, that's a still. So if I were to check multiple layers, let's hit that again. The toggle unfreezes it, right? So if I had checked maybe 2, 7, and 12, all my program layers, all my main pips in my program layers. So let's go 2, 7, and 12, and I hit go, boom, all 3 of them go, right? If I hit again, they come undone. Now, if I choose relative, notice these get grayed out in the property panel. Now it's a matter of which ones do I want to select. So if I were to draw a rectangle and select, right there, I just drew that to where it hit 12, 3, and 15, and I hit go, it only freezes those. Okay, so it's just a manual selection of which ones, and it's still the same toggle function, but it's whatever you select. So if I wanted this one, and this one, go, boom, now it does those. Okay, so the layer freeze has to do with very specific layers, freezing them and then unfreezing them. So a common application for that would be maybe the presenter has a PowerPoint presentation, okay, and they discover that a slide has an error, they want to make an edit to one. Or say the guy's at the end of his presentation and he's there with his final slide, you can hit freeze, and then that way when he unplugs his laptop from the podium input, it doesn't go to black. It'll just sit there and freeze on that layer, on that source. So that's a good option for that one. Okay. So freeze. Let's double back up to what is a device freeze key. Okay. Now, a device. So if we're going to talk about a device freeze key, we have to talk about what is a device. So if I go to the view menu, there is a hidden panel, not a hidden panel, a panel that is not currently exposed in the GUI, and it's called devices. And it brings up a virtual 8x2 button panel that you would really see on the console, okay, the Montage 2 console. And what you're doing is this panel over here reflects 12 devices that I can program. So each device, so if I select device number 1 right here, come over to the property panel, it can take control of either a single layer. Think of this from the perspective of the console. If I wanted just to take control of a very specific layer, I can say, all right, make this button automatically always take control of layer X, right? Or dual layer, right, is any pair of layers, right? Not a mixer, but any pair of adjacent layers. They have to be adjacent. Or the last item here is a mixer, okay? Now, a mixer is ties 2 layers together in kind of like an ME fashion, where you take one to program and it keeps one in preview, and you can load, switch, and they go back and forth. So in that case, if you look over in my command key here, if I go back to this, look 2 right here, I'm using a mixer. If I look at the script window, for this particular pixel space over here, I'm using a mixer right here, 1 and 2. Those 2 layers are tied together, and they're best described as a device. They're tied together and they're working together, right? So whenever I want to preview something, it'll always use the preview layer first and then dissolve, okay? So when you start looking at the freeze key and you're using mixers, there's a good chance that either one of those layers is going to be in program or preview. You don't know which one, right? Because they're tied together. They're really kind of one entity, right? So the function keys, the regular freeze key, I would have to go in and say, all right, I would always want, let's select all, deselect all. I would have to select both of these in order for those 2 layers to freeze together. Well, what if I only wanted to freeze just the program layer? Well, I can't use the absolute function with that because I never know which layer is going to be in program. So what we do in the device panel is we go in and define each device. So if I look at, excuse me, too much coffee this morning. Device 1, it's a mixer control of layers 1 and 2. And then down below is a transition type, but we're not going to get into that today. And then device 2 controls layers 3 and 4. Device 3, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, so on and so forth. So those devices are defined, okay? So those layers are defined as a device in that context, okay? So when I go back to that function key list, you're going to see a device freeze key, okay? Device freeze key basically allows you to pick, excuse me, which device you want to take control of. So here you can see you have the same freeze, unfreeze, or toggle. I'll toggle that. And now you can say, I want to, which layer of the device or the mixer do I want to freeze? If I always want to freeze the program one, I can check the program box, and then I pick the device number that's associated. So let's say I always wanted to freeze the program layer of this center pip here, which is layers 7 and 8. That I would choose device 4, because right here, device 4 controls layers 7 and 8, okay? So this particular function key, now, regardless of if I were to go through a couple of different command keys here, right, that maybe use 7 and 8, let's see if I can find another one. I didn't make another one that uses, let me just create one real fast. That makes a different source. Bear with me here. I should have thought about this one first. Let's do that. I'm going to change the source to that. Okay, so now look 4 uses Mustang in the same mixer, and look 10 on this one right here, look 2 uses IMAX. So notice 7 and 8 are going back and forth. So if I'm on this one and I choose that function key go, it freezes that layer. It again unfreeze. If I go to a different command key that uses the same mixer and then it transitions, now layer 7's in program, and I go back to that device freeze key, go, it only freezes the program layer. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one of that in that device are up there. Okay, long explanation for a relatively simple function, but it's an important one and a very effective one if you use mixers a lot. Okay. Okay, we are at layer offset. Okay, the layer offset key. I'm going to call this offset. What this does is it allows you to offset the relative coordinate, the position of a layer by a said value. Okay, So if I wanted to take, say, layer 7, sorry, and I wanted to change its position, just temporarily, I could come down here and use the relative coordinates. Note it shows a vertical offset and a horizontal offset. So let's say I do a -1 vertical, okay? Actually, let's do -2 just to ensure, because remember, 1 would take the center of the layer to the edge of the pixel space. 2, I want to ensure that that layer goes completely off the pixel space. So this should shift layer 7 up and off that pixel space. It's still in program, but it should shift it up, okay? So boom, oh, maybe not, I never chose a layer. Boy, here we go. So you got to pick your position, -1, your duration. So let's say we want to make it quick. I'll make it 15 frames. And then, whoops, I'm going to choose both layer 7 and 8 for whatever reason. I'm just going to do both. And I come over here and I click go. Flies them, I only did 1. I should have done 2. So let's go back. Let me fix this here, sorry. Let's make that positive just for a second until we can put it back. And now we'll make this -2, like I said I was going to do. There we go. So now that should take it completely off. Now if I roll back here, you'll see that layer's still above the pixel space, right? Now you got to be careful, because if I hit that button again, it's going to keep going up, okay? So if you make one for it to go up, you got to make another one to make it come down, okay? So I could basically copy this, call it offset 2, and instead of a negative value, make it a positive value, and that should bring those 2 layers back down, 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 up, up, down, so on and so forth. So if you want to manually just fly a layer off the screen temporarily without having to make a separate command key for it, this is one way to do that, because no matter what you do, if I hit that, if I go back and launch the command key, that's going to bring it back, okay? Because the command key trumps all right? Okay, so that's the layer offset. Some of these are used more frequently than others, and we'll kind of touch on some of those. Add a multi-viewer preset, okay? So a multi-viewer is a studio-specific function, Spyder Studio-specific function. It all has to do with the multi-viewer presets that Joel talked about in his webinar, okay? So what I'm going to do real quick is put that back there and go to my multi-viewer. So I've got multi-viewer set up for output 16, right? And let's say I want to, and I've got a couple of different presets right here. I've got the default ones for SourceMon and OpMon, but then I've created one here for a custom OpMon with a border and some labels, and another one here that says custom MV that shows some inputs and some of those, right? And the program space. So let's say I want to create a quick button to change the multi-viewer preset. I will go in here and call this custom MV, just as a description of what it's gonna show me. Then I would simply go to the properties panel, choose which output, and it's gonna filter out any output that's not associated as a multi-viewer. So I'll choose 16, and then I pick which of the presets do I want. Well, I'll make this one go to my custom OpMon. So now when I hit go, changed it to an OpMon. Nice thing is I can copy these really quick. I'll call this one, I picked the wrong one, dang it. Bear with me. This is what happens when you go too fast. Copy this. This one will be our custom multi-viewer. All right, so now we'll change which one it queues up. So now I can go that one, that one, that one, right? So you can quickly trigger your different multi-view looks from a function key. Like I said, we leverage those function keys to kind of utilize some of these extra features we put in. Again, it can be triggered from a button panel of your choice, and now you can hop between different looks, whatever you want to do. Moving on down. Network command. Okay, this is probably one of the most popular. Okay, let's call this network. Okay, so a network command, network function key is, this will send out an ASCII string command to any device on the network. Okay, think of any device that has an API or has a control protocol that is going to be on your network that you want to trigger from Spyder. Okay, this is outbound. Okay, not inbound, outbound. So I would put the IP address in. Let's say I've got, let's say I have a couple of Christie projectors, right? A boxer, call it a boxer. We put in the IP address, 1.110. We put in the control port for those boxers is 3002. They are a TCP command, and then you would just simply type in the command string for that particular device, and it was parentheses. We're going to call this will be a command to maybe shutter the projector. SHU, and I think it's 0. I may have the syntax wrong on that. But now when I hit go, and I'll change the name on this, we'll call this shutter PJ. When I hit go, it will send a command out to that device to shutter the projector. Create another one right here to unshutter, right? And I'll just simply change that value because I know that value is either 0 or 1. To be honest with you, I can't remember which, but look up your Christie protocol manual and you can find it. So any device on your network, projectors, Playback Pro, Pandora, you pick a product that has an API. I know they have like network coffee makers now. I've been threatening to buy one of those for our training room where I can just go, make me coffee, right? Anyway, so very powerful command. The thing is, with that one, you really just kind of have to open your mind and think about all the different devices out there that are controllable, which almost everything has an API at some point right now. So you can actually send this command. Super universal. And that function has been with the Spyder family since its inception, right? So 2 and 300 series still have this command, this function in it. So it's just been carried over into every product of the Spyder, every Spyder from the 200 series to the X20 and all the way into the X80. Okay, so super powerful. Now, next is the router salvo key. So I'm going to call this salvo, and I'm going to click real quick back to my simulator. Now we have to kind of revert back to the router conversation. So picture you have your Spyder, you have an upstream router feeding the Spyder inputs. Okay, maybe it's a Lightware 32 by 32. Okay, we've got 24 inputs on the Spyder, right? So 24 of those outputs are feeding into the Spyder. Well, there's another 8 that aren't. Okay, so if I were to go into tools, routers, and look at my Lightware router, you'll see I've got 32 by 32. I go to the router patch. I go look at my router real quick here, just so you get an idea. You can go back and watch the router webinar to catch up. But you'll see router Lightware, and you'll see output 1 to input 1, output 2 to input 2, so on and so forth. Call that unity. But if I scroll down, you have these 8 outputs of the router, the Lightware, that are not feeding the Spyder. We already have control of the router. Okay, this is good. Now we can go ahead and make cross-point switches to those outputs to the router, right? Or from the router. So if I go back to my salvo function key, we drop down the list, we choose Lightware. There are those 8 outputs. Okay, column next to it says which input. Okay, so maybe I put input 26 to output 32, input 31 to output 31, and I don't know, input 5 to output 30. Now remember, those are inputs on the router and outputs on the router. These are outputs that are not feeding Spyder. And when I hit go, boom, it will send those crosspoint commands to the router directly. So here in this configuration, I have downstage monitors being driven directly from Spyder. If I clear this off, these 2 down here. But what's to stop me from driving those downstage monitors directly from the router? Okay, the router concept is huge with that respect, because now you free up outputs to feed other displays. You free up layers because now you're no longer processing it through the canvas, the VI. Now you're just driving it direct, and now that frees up layers for Spyder as well, because anything on a pixel space requires an output and a layer to show it. Okay, so if you have the ability to take whatever source is coming into that router and directly route it to a monitor that will support it, that router salvo is a very cool function. Now, another concept of that is I've been talking about an upstream router, right? Spyder's something feeding Spyder's inputs. In a lot of very stadium applications where they have redundant systems, they will have another Spyder downstream of the Spyder. Another router downstream of the Spyder. So the Spyder outputs are feeding into the inputs of this router, right? Both the main Spyder and maybe the backup Spyder are all going into the inputs of this router. And then the outputs are then going directly to the display. Okay, so this gives us the ability to basically do a hard switch directly from main to backup. Okay, that router would probably in the router patch have nothing connected to the Spyder, but it's on the network. We're controlling it, so that's how they could do a quick switch over. So something to think about with routers, and we may have some guest panelists on that may talk to that topic in the future. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So that salvo is a super powerful command. Okay, scaled output aux. So there's a feature in Spyder. I'm going to call this. Let's call this. I'm going to call it 15, and I'll explain the naming convention here in a minute. Graphics 1. Now, in our system patch, remember we have the ability to take any output, right, or any input, and directly route it to an output. We call that direct aux. And what it'll do is it'll bypass. It doesn't require a pixel space or it doesn't require a layer, but we can say take this source and directly route it to this output. Okay, the source could be HD, the output could be UHD, and it will scale it up. The source could be UHD and the display could be HD, and it will scale it down. So it'll scale it up or down based on what you need. The function key allows you to quickly switch those changes, right? So here I've created a function key right here that says select the output aux. So I pick which output I want to switch, right? So your output needs to be set up in aux mode, okay? So I would go to output 15, which I've already done, and I've already set it in aux mode, okay? And I've already selected a default source, which happens, let's make it Blu-ray, right? So I'll just go ahead and save that. And now right down here in the system patch, you can see output 15, the resolution, and it's showing which source is being displayed on it. Now, if I go back to here to my function key, you'll see I'll choose output 15, okay? And then I'll choose which source. Now I've named this graphics 1, so I'll choose graphics 1. And when I hit go on this, one more time, there we go, sorry. You'll see that now it's referencing graphics 1. So I've made a switch there. Let's say I created a copy of this, and I'm gonna call this 15 Mustang. Now Mustang is a 4K source. So I could say, all right, instead of graphics 1, we want it to be Mustang. So now I could hit go Mustang, go graphics 1, go Mustang. And if now it's basically just hard switching back and forth. There's no crossfade, there's no swipe or anything like that. It's just basically a hard cut between those two sources. Okay. So another way to quickly manage sources, this is a great way to conserve on layer usage. Okay. You're still using an output. Okay. But now, like the DSM and the router salvo concept, now say maybe you run your DSM off an aux. And you still use an output from the Spyder, but now you're not using layers to get that single source to that monitor. So no windowing, nothing like that, okay? So just direct routes and hard cuts, okay? So super powerful, remember that, okay? Okay, second to the last one, source assignment key. I'm gonna call this IMAG all. And what this is gonna do is I pick a source, choose IMAG, choose the source I want, and then it's saying it's just going to load that source into a specified layer. Okay, it's going to kind of automatically now I can pick specific layers here, or I'm just going to say select all, just to be dramatic. And I hit go, boom, everything gets IMAG, regardless of how it's being used. Okay, notice even look at my system patch here. I'm sorry, look at my script window. All the layers that I'm not using, even they got loaded because I chose every layer in my system. Okay. Now, I could choose another one here. Let's create another one here. I'll call this Blu-ray. And what I'll do is I'll just change which source is going to it. And now it's Blu-ray. Blu-ray. Okay? So it's a quick way just to bang a source into a layer. But again, because of the command keys, notice it still shows command key 1 still hot. I could still preview what should be there and then take what should be there, because remember the command key kind of trumps all. Okay, now, so that's the source assignment key. okay? And the same thing with the relative function, kind of like the freeze, that will say if I select these two layers here and I hit Blu-ray, it's only going to change those 2 layers. Okay. Oop, that one was still absolute. So anyway, the last one in this list, sorry, I'm popping back and forth, is the still load key. Okay, this is just like the source assignment key, except this one loads a still image. Okay, so I'm going to call this still load, right? And you're basically going to browse for a picture. I'll just pick, let's pick something here. 4K, some starry pictures here, right? So now I could say, go ahead and load that still into this layer and maybe layer 11 as well. And when I hit go, loads those in there. Now, anybody that's had some experience with the X20, they realize that still performance in X20 is not instantaneous. And I'll be honest, that's being kind, right? But you will find that the still performance in the X80 is tenfold better, right? It's virtually instantaneous. You can load stills very quickly, okay? So this is where some of the functions like borders, the shaped borders, that's a still function, okay? So let me finish with this function key, but so that still function, the still load function just says load the still into a layer when I say go, kind of like the source assignment key. Sorry, I'm repeating myself, but that's what it is. So as for function keys, those are all the function keys. Now the nice thing here, like treatments, we can save function keys externally from the configuration. So say I like these 2 background mix keys, right? Also, I'll just select them both using the control function. I'll right click and I can say save to file. Opens up my file directory and I'll just call this BG mix FK. And now I have a file that I've saved that I can import into another configuration, like treatments, okay? I can also import these from a saved file. So remember the network function keys, right? There are, like I say, we can control projectors. So if I were to go in here, let's say we make another page, and I call this, let's see if I can remember how to type here, projector control, and I've created a new tab, right? I'll simply go right up here, add from file. So I'm going to import into this configuration. Now I've already gone in and saved, and there's my background function keys, but I've got another one in here called projector commands. Where are they? Right, I got them around here. Some of them right in front of me. Why can I not see them? Oh, display commands. Here we go. Basically, I've imported those in. Now I used to have a couple of M series in our training facility, and I would use these commands to power them on, power them off, shutter them, unshutter them. Okay. So what's nice is that right here you'll see left shutter closed. That's the command for left shutter close. Right shutter closed. Left shutter open. Right shutter open. Power on left. Power on right, and power off left and power off right. So I've got a bunch of them created there. So I could hit those individually, right, and trigger and power on or power off. And the next, but more importantly, another way to trigger these function keys is not just from the panel or from an external box, is I can embed them into a command key, okay, which really makes them powerful. So I could go in right here under command keys, and I'm just going to create an empty command key. I'm going to call this projector on. Okay, a relative empty command key, meaning it's not going to do anything to the screens. All it's going to do is just give me the ability to go. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Notice nothing happened, but I can go right over here into what we call the Q data menu. And we'll talk about this when we get into scripting, but I can go in right here, and I'm just going to hide these so we don't generate a ton of questions. Right here, and I can insert a function key. right? So I can say power on projector. So if I scroll down here and find my projector on, where are they? Projector left power on, right? And notice once I put that in there, it puts a little yellow block right here. But notice it also presented me with the option to add another one. So now I'll go down here, scroll down a little further. Right projector on. So now it's got left power on, right power on. And I put them both on the program queue. So whenever I hit program right here, say I go to preview on this command key, notice my queue line right here. When I hit program, boom. Sorry, it's supposed to be going down. I don't know why it's not. Oh, okay. Anyway, the idea that my screen kind of locked up there. Once it hits that queue, it will trigger, it'll fire those commands off to go power on the projectors. So think you just really kind of have to open your mind to how these function keys can be, one, how they can be triggered, and then within a command key, how to stack them on top of each other to do multiple things at a specific queue. Okay, and when we get into scripting, you'll see why that happens. Okay, I'm assuming there's some questions out there.
Yeah, talk about the question that we have is, are all these function keys direct to program, or can it be fired off to do something in the preview?
There's, bear with me a second here. My system is frozen. My apologies. Some of them are very specific. There's only a few that are specific to programmer preview, okay? And the ability to not be able to show you those right now is a little frustrating. But just off of memory, anything that would be programmer preview specific, you have to think about that, would be the external command key recall, right? If I'm going to trigger another command key, that's the only thing that would say, I want to do this here, right? Or if you want them to happen in preview, if you want that function key to happen in preview, you just simply embed it into the preview queue. Oh, now it's really going downhill. I apologize, folks. Let me just turn that off temporarily. So, can you guys see my face still? I hope so. Probably way too big now. But yeah, you can actually put that in to the preview queue instead of the program. You can put any of those function keys into the preview queue and do it there instead of the program queue. So I hope that answers your question. Can a source change a function key used live? Or will this switching cause blinking? Can a source change function key? Source change. The source assignment key shouldn't cause any blinking. It's a hard switch, right? You'll just see it go click, click. Probably, it should be just one frame switch back and forth, right? So that should be a nice, good, clean cut. Request. Request a key for loading stills in the background. I see who wrote that one too. Yeah. If I had a nickel for every time I asked for that one, I'll put it in the bucket. We can hopefully get that one someday.
Now, you actually,
sorry.
You actually can do a workaround with that. If you use the network function key and the API to load the still into the background or into the pixel space, you can do it that way.
Yeah, I have a video that shows how to do that. You want to be cautious, right? I'm gonna do that because whenever you're loading new backgrounds into pixel spaces, you're going to notice that when you do that, you are going to get a working status bar that prevents you from doing anything in the GUI. So when it loads backgrounds, it's stopping you from doing something else. So you can do that, but the trick is we'll call it an advanced technique to load a background image into a pixel space at a queue. You can do that with the kind of with the external protocol, but you risk interrupting functions that are some unintended consequences. So I'd be very cautious in doing that, but it is possible. Yes, absolutely. Jason is absolutely right. There is a way to do that, and I believe we have a video that shows exactly how to do that, or some instruction, and I can make that available to people. Where can we find the network command key strings? Oh, looks like Joel just answered that. We have an API to match it. Yeah. Are there still network commands to load stills? Network commands to load stills. If you're talking about loading a still into a layer, yeah, I just showed you the last one, the still load key. You can do it to a pixel space, but you want to be, again, cautious for all the reasons I just explained. I think that's it. The gentleman who just wrote that question, you can hit me directly if there's anything specific I'm not addressing, but should be a relatively simple thing. Yeah, Joel?
Yeah, Peter, you were doing a copy and pasting of function keys.
Yeah.
I think it would be just nice to kind of highlight how you did that so everybody knows, and if your software's up and running again.
I'm a little nervous right now. All right, hold on. Let me see if I can. Let me do something real quick. All right. Bear with me, and if you know I'm going to edit this out of the recording. Just saying. And I'm sure a lot of people are chuckling at that one. Give me 2 seconds, and I'll be right back up here. Yeah, that's a command key function, right? To copy command keys and copy function keys. You can do it either way. Oops, it's opening up on the wrong screen over here. Oh my goodness. Hang on, here we go. Here. So for function keys, to copy function keys, you can just right click and click copy, okay? And then right click and then paste, right?
Peter, we can't see the screen.
Ah, dang it, sorry, my bad. Thanks for chiming in. There we go. Let me do that again. So you can right click and you'll see a copy, and then right click, paste. And you can just rename it new F key. And that's how you can do that. Now, if you copy that, you make sure that you click on the new one, so you start editing the new one, right? Now, same with the command keys, or you can do it, I'm sorry, another way to do that is to hold the control key down, then left click and hold and drag, and then drop it in a new space and call it something else. Okay, oops, right? So you can control click drag, or you can right click copy and right click paste. So two ways to do that, and that works the same both in function keys and in command keys. Okay.
And show how you can do that, drag and drop into a page.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So say I want a couple of these, I want to duplicate some of these. So you can just take any one of them and left click only, no control key here. I'm just going to drag this and I'm going to hover my cursor over that second page, bring it back out and let it go. That's how you move. Okay. So I'm going to move this back real quick. Or if you want to copy, control, click, and while you're doing that, hover and then drop. Whoops. There you go. I pasted a couple of them there. Whoops, I don't know why that one moved, but okay. So yeah, you can control, click, and drag. The trick is just making sure that your cursor hovers over the desired page you want to drop that to, okay? Anything else out there that I can address? No? I'm scrolling through the questions here real quick just to see if there's anything I haven't, yeah, go ahead, Joel.
There was just an ask about changing the colors of the function keys like we can for command keys, and just to highlight that it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's different in a way that you can't. Okay, you cannot color code function keys. I had to double check, but sometimes they sneak that stuff in, but you cannot color code function keys. Okay, only command keys. So you can click on a command key, go over here to the custom button color, right? Once that's checked, you can come over here and you can either type in an RGB value, or you can go over here and either sample from the spectrum here, or actually, you know, pick a color and play with all that stuff as well. Okay, but short answer to function key coloring, you can't. I think I've got all these. Are function keys direct to program, or do they have a preview option? I think I caught that one, Karen. That really kind of depends. Yeah, the function key to preview really kind of depends on which one you're doing and where if you want to insert it into the preview queue when you want it to happen, right, on a command key. let's see here. Make sure that when you copy the command or function key that the button you want to copy it is highlighted. Yes, that's a very important thing to make sure you have the correct one selected to do that. Can Spyder Studio be ran wirelessly? Yes, but I wouldn't advise, right? When we go through training, my in-class training is usually full of freelance folks. So we get into all kinds of conversations during rehearsals and things like that. Wireless can be a very fickle thing, so you want to be real cautious with that. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, it's always good that when you're building these things and you're building looks and you want everything, you want to get out in front of house. You want to, you know, take your laptop out there, look at the screen, kind of look and see if your layer's butted up against a pixel space, or if it's not in the right position, or you want a border a little thicker or something like that to be able to see it from front of house. That's a good application if you have a wireless router to put the Spyder into that. I would be cautious about running it wirelessly in a show environment. Or, you know, we had struggled in trade shows, you know, about doing stuff wirelessly, but if anybody's tried to run wireless in a trade show, it's pandemonium, right? And it may work, you know, the day before, but then when the show opens, you got all kinds of wireless stuff going on. So twofold, yes, you can, but I wouldn't probably suggest it. Is there a limit to how many function keys can be assigned to a command key? I have not found that limit yet. Okay, but remember that Spyder runs asynchronously, so it's got to send them out in an order. So there may be a millisecond or two between each command. I've had as many as 10 function keys loaded into one specific queue, kind of like we did for where was the projector control right here? Sorry, which command key did I put that into? Put it into one of these right here, this one. So when I go to look at that, every time I add one, it gives me another spot to add another. So I've gone up to over 10 in one particular queue. So I wouldn't, well, I won't say I wouldn't, but you could try it. Be cautious though, okay? Let's see, I think that's gonna be good for now. Maybe we have one more question here. Just for getting a bird's eye view for sizing pips. I'll call out Geronimo on that one. Unfortunately, you can't speak on this, but tell you what, Geronimo, reach out to me directly, and I can help out on that. Okay. I think for now, I think what we'll do is we'll call it at 53 minutes. Again, thank you very much for coming. Thanks again to Joel. Thanks again to Jason. Thanks again for coming. All right.